Welcome back to another episode of the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm your host, John Kuzma. We're going to talk a little bit about the Jim Harbaugh story in this latest episode. The Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh, and I think that's a great hire for this football team. They're going to be much better with Jim Harbaugh. And, we got to talk about how we got here when we're talking about Jim Harbaugh, because you really have to go back to Michigan, that final year at Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, and what was happening to Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was coming under fire because of jealousy. Jim Harbaugh is so good at what he does that it makes a lot of people jealous. And he was taking heat from the NCAA. He was taking heat from the Big Ten. There's people at Michigan that don't like him that much. Ryan Day tried to get him in trouble, did get him in trouble, I guess you can say, got him suspended over, the sign stealing incident. So he was suspended twice that final year at Michigan. And I think Jim Harbaugh recognized that politically he was going to always be under fire because of jealousy. And he knew that if he stuck around at Michigan, the NCAA might come after him again. The Big Ten might come after him again. There's people at Michigan, like I said, that, weren't too fond of him. I think he was just over the drama at that point. Being suspended twice that final year he was at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh just had enough of it, decided I need a fresh start, and at least he would be on the field for every single game if he went back to the NFL. In college, he was getting suspended left and right, and he didn't want to deal with that anymore. So Jim Harbaugh goes to the Chargers, and let's tell it like it is. This was the biggest coaching splash of the offseason. All these teams were looking for coaches. A bunch of teams were looking for coaches. Dan Quinn goes to the Commanders. Antonio Pierce gets hired by the Raiders. I like the Jim Harbaugh hiring by the Chargers more than all those other hires that these other teams did. And I think the Chargers are going to be in great shape with Jim Harbaugh. I think immediately he comes in and, he does things differently. He gets to Los Angeles. He does this press conference, talks about how he wants to live in a trailer park in an RV, kind of quirky, a little bit goofy, but he's a good guy. And he's focused on football, and that's all that matters to Jim Harbaugh. So I think the Chargers knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that he had to be the guy that was at the top of their list when it comes to who their next coach was going to be. So it was a great job by the Chargers. You have to give them all the credit in the world for being able to get this deal done and for being able to bring in Jim Harbaugh, a guy that's going to give them a legitimate shot at winning a Super Bowl because he's so good at what he does. There's no debating that. Jim Harbaugh is a great football coach. He's proven that time and time again. So for the Chargers as an organization to land the whale hire, this is the big fish. This is a whale. Jim Harbaugh is going to deliver the goods. We know he's more than capable of doing that. The Chargers got it done. You have to applaud the Chargers for that. Los Angeles scores a big victory. They get the top coach that was available during this cycle. I know Bill Belichick was out there too. But, Jim Harbaugh was coming off a Super Bowl. Bill Belichick, great coach, the greatest coach ever. But, ever since Tom Brady left, I think Bill Belichick has lost a little bit of luster. That's debatable. Bill Belichick is still the greatest coach of all time. But what happened is Bill Belichick has struggled so much these past couple of years. And with Jim Harbaugh coming off that national championship with the Michigan Wolverines, I think interest this time around was a little bit higher for Jim Harbaugh than it was for Bill Belichick. You can't tell me that's not the case because Jim Harbaugh is coaching this year and Bill Belichick is not going to be coaching this year. We know that's going to be true unless Bill Belichick takes a college job. I don't see him doing that. I see him sitting on the sidelines for a year, maybe doing some media gigs, getting a year of rest, and then trying again next year during the next hiring cycle of NFL coaches. That's what I see for Bill Belichick. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows, though? That's the way I see it going. What Jim Harbaugh does, there's two things that Jim Harbaugh does really well as a football coach. One, he's a motivator, and two, he provides structure for his teams. You look at Michigan, going back to Michigan again, he lit a fire under that team. They kept getting better and they kept getting close, and people were wondering whether or not he could get the job done, when they were losing to Georgia and TCU and, get into that playoff opportunity when it's down to 4 teams, but they really quite couldn't get over the hump. Well, Jim Harbaugh finally delivered, and it just shows that, sometimes you have to build things up, put yourself in a position to capitalize, and then later on down the road, you get to capitalize. Jim Harbaugh ultimately got the job done, won that national championship for Michigan, built them back up into the program that they used to be in the past. And, he was so successful for those Wolverines and really reinvented them as a brand. It had been a while since the Wolverines were really taken seriously like they used to be in the past. Remember, that's the team that has the most the most college football wins of all time. But they were kind of losing it a little bit. Jim Harbaugh brought them back to that upper echelon of college football. So he does that by motivating his players. He lights a fire under them. He gets the best out of his players. He knows how to connect with his players. He does a great job at getting everybody to buy in. Everybody believes in their coach when Jim Harbaugh is their coach. That was clearly the case at Michigan, but it was also the case with the 49ers when they went to a Super Bowl. And Jim Harbaugh was having a lot of success with them too. And if you want to go back before that, at Stanford as well. So he's got a proven track record of motivating his players and getting them to run through a brick wall for their coach. They play with maximum effort, which is, the highest compliment that you can give a coach is, that their players play with maximum effort and never take a play off. I think Jim Harbaugh does a great job of doing that. The last job we seen him at Michigan, those players played so hard they won a national championship. So Jim Harbaugh, great motivator. There's no debating that. The second thing he does well is he provides structure for a team. The teams are organized. They know their assignment. They don't make mistakes by not knowing what they're supposed to do on a play. If a player doesn't know he has to pull on this play, the guard doesn't know he has to pull, well, guess what? That could blow the whole play up because that team didn't execute as well as they should have. That doesn't happen with Jim Harbaugh coach teams. They know their assignment. They know exactly what they have to do to execute at the highest level. That goes back to coaching because Jim Harbaugh knows how to teach the game. He knows how to make it so his players are able to consume the information that he needs them to do. They understand their assignment. They buy into it. It's just a flawless coaching job when Jim Harbaugh is at the helm. And I expect that to translate over to the Chargers. I think he's going to get the most out of those players. I think, from going through, their reads and, just making adjustments when they're on the field and on the fly, when you're breaking that huddle and coming to the line of scrimmage, it's not just the quarterback. It's not just Justin Herbert. It's also the linemen, understanding how the defense is, lined up. Do they have a overstacked defense to one side of the field where we're supposed to be running the football, and now we have to flip the play to the opposite side because there's one less defender in the area of where we're trying to run the football. It's simple things like that, and by making, not only Justin Herbert, but those offensive linemen smarter, so they are all in sync and able to execute when a play gets flipped to the opposite side of the field. Everybody's in sync and they're coordinated. That's the big thing. When teams are coordinated better and they can adjust on the fly and make those adjustments, they're going to have more success. We know that's the case. I think Jim Harbaugh helps out a lot with the Chargers in that regard as well. So for a fact they're going to execute better, which is another huge reward for hiring Jim Harbaugh. How it changes the Chargers. When you look at how it changes the Chargers, what was the Chargers' weakness? I go back to Brandon Staley and a lot of the boneheaded decisions he made and how the team would melt down under Brandon Staley and how it wasn't just scheme because, I know Brandon Staley gets a lot of crap as a head coach, and he wasn't a good head coach. There's no debating that. But people forget he actually was a good defensive coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams. So when he was with the Rams, he got his players on that defense to buy in. But as a head coach, I don't think the Chargers really bought into Brandon Staley. I don't. I think the players were a little bit checked out. I think they were a little bit frustrated with the direction that the team was going. And that's why we saw the team collapse a lot under Brandon Staley. I think back to that playoff game against the Jaguars. And, that was kind of a microcosm of the Brandon Staley era. And that was the Chargers at their high point. Even at their highest point, they still had a meltdown in that playoff game. And I think about all the collapses they had, in the second half of those seasons where it just, the wheels fell off and Brandon Staley couldn't get his guys to buy in and he couldn't get them to answer the call when the team needed it. I don't see that happening with Jim Harbaugh. I see it being the complete opposite. I see it being, at the second half of the season or the midway point of the season when this team really has to lock in. They're going to do that under Jim Harbaugh. They didn't do that under Brandon Staley. It was the exact opposite. They started to unravel when it was crunch time with Brandon Staley. With Jim Harbaugh, those guys are going to be locked in. They're going to be focused. Not only focused, they're going to be laser focused under Jim Harbaugh. So this team's going to be better. So from what they were with Brandon Staley to what they're going to be with Jim Harbaugh, they're going to be a better football team because Jim Harbaugh is going to motivate his players, because he is going to provide more structure, because his players are going to know their assignments. And I think, with Jim Harbaugh being a little bit quirky in his press conferences, he's always been a little bit a fun guy that's a little bit of a weirdo and he kind of takes pride in it. I think the players see him having fun with it in those press conferences. And I think they can see that he has a burning desire to succeed in football. And I think that passion is contagious for his players. And with the Chargers, it's going to be the same thing that we've seen every chapter in the past with Jim Harbaugh, where they're buying into it because Jim Harbaugh is leading by example. He's a family man. He loves football. He's passionate. He's got a burning desire to succeed. He's a great teacher. So all those things make it fun for the players. And when the players are having fun, they're charged up. And you get more out of them. And it becomes contagious, but it's a positive contagious where everyone is just chomping at the bits to get after it because they know their coach is preparing himself to get after it. He's doing everything he can to get his mindset into it, to get after it, and they follow suit. They see their head coach with this burning desire to win and to compete. Really, it's about competing. It's about competing first, and the rest takes care of itself. And when we say the rest takes care of itself, it's winning football games. But I think on a fundamental level for Jim Harbaugh, it's about competing and letting the rest take care of itself. And when you compete and you get yourself geared up and ready to go, things tend to fall in line. So that's the Jim Harbaugh philosophy, making sure he shows up and competes every single day, gives his best effort, has fun doing it, and he checks all the boxes doing it that way. And then as a result of that, the team starts to win more often. And once guys see that the team starts to win more often, it becomes an attractive destination to be. Suddenly free agents want to play there. Suddenly guys are hoping that the Chargers draft me. They want to be a part of that organization because they can see it's heading in the right direction. That's the case with Jim Harbaugh. That's going to be the case with the Chargers, and they're going to be a solid football team. You know, it's a tough division, though. We know it's a tough division. You look at Kansas City, they've been a dynasty. They're in the Super Bowl this year. We all know how good Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have been. They just keep winning. They just keep getting it done. They're in the AFC West. It's a tough division. The Denver Broncos have gotten better under Sean Payton. They've made big strides under Sean Payton. They're more competitive. There's no debating that. They're getting better. So that's something to keep an eye on the AFC in the AFC West. The Broncos are getting better with Sean Payton, and ultimately that was a good hire for the Broncos. No surprise there. The Raiders hire Antonio Pierce, and I can make a case that the Chargers were also getting better with Antonio Pierce. I think he was a better motivator than Josh McDaniels was. We all know Josh McDaniels is good with X and O's. We all know he was a good offensive coordinator with the Patriots for all those years, but guys didn't quite buy into Josh McDaniels. He didn't motivate his players very well, and his players, as a result, didn't respond to him. But I think, with Antonio Pierce, the Raiders are getting better too. So it's a really tough division for Jim Harbaugh, which means hiring Jim Harbaugh was that much more important because the Chargers didn't want to lose any ground in this division to an up-and-coming Broncos team with Sean Payton that's clearly getting better. They didn't want to lose any ground in this division to a Raiders team with Antonio Pierce, who started to figure it out a little bit in the second half of that season when Antonio Pierce took over the interim head coaching job. And then you still have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in this division. The Chargers needed Jim Harbaugh to match fire with fire in the AFC West. It's been a tough division for a while. The dynasty that is the Kansas City Chiefs has been in this division the whole time. So the Chargers needed Jim Harbaugh to maybe knock the Chiefs off in this division and put an end to their reign and put an end to their dynasty. Who else was going to do it? I don't think any other candidate out there during this last head coaching cycle where these head coaches were being hired, I don't think any other candidate out there would really pack the punch that Jim Harbaugh does. And I think Jim Harbaugh is the guy that if you're eventually going to see the Chiefs get knocked off in the AFC West, it might be Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. Maybe it's Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. But I think for sure Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers are a team that's capable of coming into this AFC West division and shaking things up. Let's get to Justin Herbert. So Justin Herbert, all the talent in the world, supremely talented. He's physically superior than almost every quarterback in the league. And he's had this great start to his career statistically. He's been outstanding. We know how good he's been, but he's been held back by the Chargers a little bit. He's been held back by Brandon Staley. And all his talent has kind of, been for nothing because the team hasn't been able to capitalize on it. Think about how much better Justin Herbert is going to be with Jim Harbaugh there guiding him. I mean, he finally gets that fair shot that he's been waiting for. He finally has a team that can match his output. Because for the longest time, Justin Herbert was given this great output, but the team wasn't matching his output. That's not going to be the case with Jim Harbaugh. The team is going to match his output now. And that means collectively as a whole, the Chargers are going to be so much better. And with Justin Herbert, what's his weakness? What's his weakness? I think when it comes to being able to throw the football down the field and just letting it fly, I think that's Justin Herbert's strength. But what's his weakness? I think Justin Herbert sometimes, when he's going through his progressions, can kind of get baited into some things. I think if the corner's bailing to a deep outside third, the corner's bailing and giving up the flats, and he's going deep to the deep outside third. And I think if that safety drops underneath into the flats, I think sometimes Justin Herbert can get a little bit baited into that safety that's jumping the flats. When a team executes better as a whole, guess what? The quarterback executes better too. They go hand in hand. So I think Justin Herbert is going to execute better when he realizes that safety's dropping down to the flats and the corner's bailing. He's going to just go to his next read and let it fly. And he's going to be crisper at his decisions. Not that he was horrible. He's never been a horrible decision maker. You don't have one of the best starts ever as a quarterback and be a horrible decision maker. But let's face it, he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. But if there's one thing he could get a little bit better at, he could be a little bit crisper with his progressions. We know it's not his arm and his strengths and his physical strengths and his skill set. That's not his weakness. But I have seen him, make some mistakes in crunch time. I have seen him, just kind of make some boneheaded decisions. It hasn't been horrible, like I said. This guy's still one of the top players in the league, but I do think he's going to be a little bit crisper under Jim Harbaugh. I think the offensive line is going to be crisper, which is going to give him more protection, so he's going to be more comfortable in the pocket. I think the receivers are going to know their assignment even better under Jim Harbaugh, so he's not going to have to worry about someone running the wrong route, so it looks like he telegraphed the football because his guy ran it out when he was supposed to run a post, and now it looks like Justin Herbert is just sailing one to the free safety, and it looks like Justin Herbert messed up. Well, what we don't see as fans is that receiver was supposed to run a post over the middle, and he actually ran an out route. So we're seeing it from the perspective of what the hell is Justin Herbert doing? He threw it right to that free safety. What we don't see is, that wide receiver was actually supposed to run a post route, and that throw would have been right on the money because that post would have been right in front of that free safety, and it would have actually been a throw that's on its mark. The quarterback got it right, but the wide receiver got it wrong by running the wrong route. That's not going to happen because the players are going to buy in more under Jim Harbaugh. They're going to know their assignments better, so you're not going to see the wrong route being ran by one of these wide receivers, which makes Justin Herbert look bad. So Justin Herbert's going to make a big leap under Jim Harbaugh. We all got to see what Jim Harbaugh did for J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. He helped J.J. McCarthy become, let's face it, the guy's going to be a first-round pick in this upcoming draft. I would say that Jim Harbaugh did wonders for J.J. McCarthy's career. J.J. McCarthy's going to get paid because of Jim Harbaugh, and J.J. McCarthy deserves a lot of praise too because he's holding up his end of the bargain as well. But Jim Harbaugh did wonders for J.J. McCarthy. They had a great relationship. They got along great. Now Jim Harbaugh is going to get to work with Justin Herbert, and Jim Harbaugh is kind of this QB whisperer. So he's going to get the most out of Justin Herbert. And I don't think Brandon Staley and the Chargers were getting the most out of Justin Herbert. that's going to change going forward with Jim Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert are going to have a great relationship. I think I know Jim Harbaugh is excited about coaching Justin Herbert because he praised him and said, this guy's one of the best in the business and gave him all the praise in the world. I think on the opposite side of that relationship, I think Justin Herbert's going to love playing for Jim Harbaugh as well because he's going to allow Justin Herbert to take his game to that next level, which is going to be terrifying. It's going to be terrifying for these teams in the league when Justin Herbert hits that next gear and he finds that next level because he's already so good. When he evolves and takes it to another level, it's terrifying for the rest of this league. They should be frightened about going up against this next level Justin Herbert, this new version that he's going to evolve into. I mean, if you're a defensive coordinator, you're not going to be able to sleep at night because we're going to see Justin Herbert transform into something else. And when you look at where he's transforming from and what he's going to transform into, I mean, that's really, really promising for the Chargers fans. There's going to be some celebrations in the future if you're a Chargers fan. Let's talk about the receivers, and they're going to be in a receiver-friendly offense with Jim Harbaugh. You got Keenan Allen. Jim Harbaugh already said he wants Keenan Allen to stick around. Keenan Allen at one time was the best route runner in the league, still one of the better route runners. He knows how to set guys up like he's doing one thing, and then he breaks off his route in the opposite direction. The defensive back gets lost. He can't stay on Keenan Allen's hip just because Keenan Allen's so good at shaking these defensive backs, cornerbacks, safeties. It doesn't matter. Keenan Allen can set them up well and then break off his route. And, always seems to get open, has a knack for getting open because he is so good at route running. Jim Harbaugh wants Keenan Allen to stick around. He's going to be a crucial piece of the puzzle. And maybe he's not in the huge role that he's been in the past, but, when Keenan Allen's a role player for you at the wide receiver position, guess what? You're in pretty good shape. And even if he has to be the number 2 or the number 3, I mean, that's a pretty good role player to have. So the Chargers are going to be in good shape. Quentin Johnston, the guy that was the rookie this past year, came out of TCU, had an underwhelming season as a rookie, didn't show enough. I think that changes under Jim Harbaugh, too. I think Quentin Johnston finds his stride under Jim Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to understand that the future of this Chargers offense is dependent on Quentin Johnston and making sure that he elevates his role in this offense and becomes a critical piece for this team. When you have a guy that's a first-round pick, you got to get the most out of that guy. And when he's a first-round pick, he's supposed to lead that team into the future. Jim Harbaugh's well aware of this. He knows that if the Chargers get everything they possibly can out of Quentin Johnston, their chances of, peaking as a football team are greatly improved. So Jim Harbaugh is going to do everything he can to get Quentin Johnston back on track, and I think Quentin Johnston kind of turns back the clock because he was dominant at TCU. I think we start to see him take the next step and get closer to at least being a dominant player. I think it starts off with him being really good, and then he sets himself up, and then he'll have a chance at being a dominant player. But when you're going from a player who was underwhelming as a rookie to being a good player, that's a big progression. You made a lot of progress. And then that sets him up, 2 years from now from dominating the NFL. Now, maybe he makes a big jump and dominates in year 2, but it's kind of hard to say he's going to do that because we got to just see him as a good player first before he can dominate. And like I said, he was a little bit underwhelming. So I think getting Jim Harbaugh in there is huge for Quentin Johnston, which is huge for this football team as a whole because they invested a first-round pick in Quentin Johnston. So he has to get back on track and handle his business in order for the Chargers to capitalize on what they want to be in the future. Then you look at Mike Williams. That was a huge loss for this team. The Chargers lost Mike Williams. That was a huge loss for this team. Mike Williams is one of the more athletic wide receivers in the National Football League. He's so good at elevating above the defender and high pointing the football. When you talk about those acrobatic catches and being able to jump, 44 inches off the ground? I mean, he gets up there. I mean, the guy has a vertical. He can jump, and he out-jumps these defenders, these defensive backs. Then he's a big-bodied receiver, too. So not only is he out-jumping these defenders, he has this huge body that he kind of boxes out these defenders, almost like a center or a power forward in basketball. But the difference is he's also jumping. So he's jumping above you. He's got this huge body, so he jumps above you, and he boxes you out. And he's so good at maintaining concentration on these jump balls that he goes up for that, we always say jump balls are 50-50. Jump balls with not Quentin Johnston, jump balls with Mike Williams are like 70-30. I mean, that's how good he is in these jump ball situations. And I think he's going to be even better with Jim Harbaugh just because the offensive line is going to be better. It's going to give Justin Herbert more time. So there's going to be more opportunities in the passing game. That's going to make Mike Williams even better. And, he's made huge strides in his career. I think with his athletic ability, I mean, he can really dominate the NFL. Losing him was a huge loss for the Chargers. They missed him this past season. So getting him back is going to be huge. And then adding Jim Harbaugh too. The sky is the limit. Correction, there is no limit. The sky isn't the limit for Mike Williams. There's no limit in sight. The last thing about Jim Harbaugh we got to talk about is there's one other thing that Jim Harbaugh hangs his hat on. And the last thing we're going to talk about that Jim Harbaugh hangs his hat on is physicality. He has physical football teams. You look at that offensive line at Michigan, I mean, they were running through that Ohio State defensive line. They were physical against Alabama in that college football playoff game. They're a physical team, and those offensive linemen are almost downhill offensive linemen because they just blast that defensive line and push them backwards, and they beat you up. They're a physical football team that roughs you up, and they beat the hell out of the defense. Jim Harbaugh knows how important that is in football. He knows that you have to set the tone with your physicality. And that's something that he focuses on when he's a head coach. Getting guys that, can live up to his philosophy as a physical football coach that leads a physical football team. So he's going to go out there and handpick the guys that he needs to get on that offensive line that can go out there and rough some teams up to the point where, when they're running the football, these offensive linemen are licking their chops because they want to go get a piece of some action too. They want to go beat the hell out of that guy lined up across from them. And they're going to set the tone in these games by dominating in the trenches, by making sure that at the line of scrimmage, they're winning the football game. And when you see those two lines collide after the snap, it's the Chargers offensive line that is going to be pushing that line of scrimmage backwards. They're going to be pushing the Chargers offense down the field. because they're going to be blowing up these defensive linemen, and these defensive linemen are going to be heels. They're going to be fighting for their lives because they're on their heels and on the verge of being pancaked, because Jim Harbaugh gets guys that are tone setters with their physicality. And it's not just the offensive side of the ball. That Michigan defense was, they were all about their pursuit. It was 11 helmets to the football. It was guys that don't take any plays off, maximum effort type of football players. And Jim Harbaugh gets that from his players on both sides of the ball. So what's that going to do to a Chargers team that has all the talent in the world? The Chargers are talented. They've always been talented. They just didn't have the right guy to lead this team into battle. They have that guy with Jim Harbaugh. And when you think about all the talent they have and the fact that the team's going to be more coordinated and more structured and they're going to be more motivated than they've ever been, it's going to get better for the Chargers. Anybody that knows football can see that. They can see that it's going to get better for the Chargers. They can see that it's going to get better for Derwin James, for Joey Bosa. It's going to get better on the offensive side of the ball for Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson. The team's going to shape up, and they're going to be a whole different football team because of those things we talked about. The fact that they're going to get 11 footballs or 11 helmets to the football. The fact that nobody's going to take any plays off. They're going to hit you, and they're going to light you up. The RH factor, the run and hit factor, how well they run on defense, which is their pursuit, because you got to have a team that has great pursuit, and you got to have 11 guys in pursuit. They're going to do that with Jim Harbaugh. And when they arrive at the football, they're going to deliver a hit. And what happens when that happens? Those running backs don't want to run the ball as much. They're hoping you call pass play because those guys on the other side of the ball are smacking. Derwin James is smacking. Joey Bosa is beating up the offensive tackle, and he's smacking our quarterback. And when you put your players in a position to succeed because your scheme executes so well, because your coach is so good, it allows your players to thrive in those conditions. Derwin James, Joey Bosa. We'll see what happens with Khalil Mack. But, if those guys are tuned in, and if they're getting help from the other 9 players that are on the field, 8 players that are on the field, we're going to see this Chargers team make huge strides. They're going to be physical. And what happens for Justin Herbert when his offensive line are blasting people? They're protecting perfectly in pass protection. But not only that, the running game improves tenfold because the offensive linemen are just blowing the defense back and open up these huge gaping holes for the running backs to run through. Well, guess what? Now play action opens up for Justin Herbert. Now he's got a running game that can take the pressure off him and kind of lull the defense to sleep a little bit when it comes to the passing game, because if you're focused on stopping the run because the Chargers are gashing you so much with their running game, what happens to those safeties and cornerbacks when there's a lot of run plays? They start to get lulled to sleep a little bit, and then play action pass, everybody sells out a little bit. The Chargers have been running a lot, so everybody's kind of creeping up a little bit. And guess what? Mike Williams just opened up deep down the field, a nice, easy throw for Justin Herbert. So play action for Justin Herbert, having a running game, having a more physical offensive line. It's like a trickle-down effect. Every phase of the game starts to improve, and it can all be traced back to Jim Harbaugh. This was a huge splash for the Chargers. They're going to be motivated, they're going to be more structured, and they're going to be more physical. So you're going to see the Chargers make huge strides in the AFC West. This team is on the rise, and right now, they're one of the teams that has certainly won the offseason. I love the direction they're going in with Jim Harbaugh. I love that hire, and I like what's going on for the Chargers right now. So I'm clapping my hands for them right now. They did a great job hiring Jim Harbaugh. A lot of teams wanted him. The Chargers got it done. They deserve our praise for that. The Chargers are going to be for real. It's only a matter of time. We're going to see improvement right away with Jim Harbaugh. But in 5 years, we could be talking about a team that's going to hoist a Vince Lombardi trophy because Jim Harbaugh wins everywhere he goes. That's all I got for this latest episode of the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm John Kuzma. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys want to be a member, you can sign up by clicking the link in the episode description box. Do that and you can get access to all our content. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm John Kuzma. I'm signing off.